Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 65 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Erzman, and as always, really grateful to be your host today. And we're going to spend most of our time today walking through a story, but I think it also has some really practical implications for those of us in ministry, some practical lessons that we can learn about a really important topic about succession, and more specifically, how to succeed after a long-term pastor resigns. And so I'm really excited to share this conversation with Eric Nelson. Eric is the new lead pastor of South Mountain Community Church out in Utah. And Eric shares this story really well of how he has recently taken over after Paul Robie retired. Many of you might know Paul, kind of a legend MB pastor. And Eric and I talked about how the capital C church, the church around the world, the church here in America, even in our church, USMB family, it's kind of in this season of change where a lot of kind of the boomer age pastors are passing the torch onto the millennials, the 30-year-olds. And that can be a really touchy subject. How do you handle big transitions of leadership? That's something that's very important that we obviously want to do well. South Mountain did do that really well, and Eric's a great example of how to lead through change with humility. And Eric does a great job sharing a story with us, but also sharing some advice for us. So I really think you're going to enjoy this, especially if your church is in a season where you might be prepping for a change in leadership. I think there's a lot that we can learn from South Mountain. So let's take a quick break to hear from a sponsor, and then we'll dive into Eric's story and talk all about succession.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Mennonite Central Committee. MCC's Serving and Learning Together SALT program is a year-long, cross-cultural experience that gives young adults the chance to dive deep into another culture, live out their values, and gain hands-on experience. The skills, knowledge, and personal capacity they build while experiencing another culture will exercise their faith muscles and set them up for success in their future career. Learn more at mcc.org/SALT.
All right, my friends. Well, I'm excited to introduce you to a guest that I've been looking forward to talking to. Today, we're talking to Eric Nelson. Eric is the new lead pastor of South Mountain Community Church in Utah. Some of you may have gotten to know him over the years. So, Eric, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Yeah, Matt, it's great to be with you. Really happy to talk about this last season for me personally and for our church.
Yeah, your story is really interesting. I'm excited to dive in, and it's a topic that I think a lot of church leaders really probably don't spend enough time thinking about, and it's their succession plan. And so, and especially now, I don't know if you noticed this, Eric, but it seems like church-wide, we're in this interesting season where some of the kind of heroes of the last generation of Christianity, they've all kind of hit at the same time.
The boomers, they're coming to the end. The boomers,
the Rick Warrens
ready to take over.
Exactly, the Rick Warrens and the Bill Hybels, all those, all the kind of heroes are all kind of transitioning at the same time. So I think it's wise that we're talking about this. So. For people who don't know you, let's start with you, some of your kind of personal bio stuff. Family, how long have you been at South Mountain? And we'll dive into your church story here. Yeah,
grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Really, I've only worked at a couple churches in my life. Became a Christian at 18, senior year of high school, just by reading the New Testament to investigate it. And by the end of that, I was convinced Jesus was who he said he was and did what he said he would do. So I committed to follow him and showed up at a local church in the area and quickly found myself volunteering and interning, turned into a part-time position in youth ministry, and did a bachelor's degree at Washington State University, did a master's of divinity at Multnomah University. And one of our professors there, Roger Troutman, went to school with a guy named Paul Robie. And so when I graduated, my really good friend, Jeremy, took a job out here in Utah because of that connection. I went to a church in the Northwest. Well, Jeremy's first summer, he flew me out to speak at a high school camp. I'd never been to Utah before, really had not even thought of Utah. Got here, was incredibly impressed with the ministry of South Mountain Community Church. Got back from that, Paul called me and said, "Hey, heard good things about you. Do you think you'd be interested in joining our team?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, well, let's talk again if that ever changes." And so we would chat every once in a while. A couple of years went by, and my wife and I were feeling like we were aging out of youth ministry. And the church I was at didn't have a real vision for church planting, but that was something I was passionate about. And so sort of stumbled into multi-site. Paul Robie called me again and said, "Hey, just want you to know we're getting ready to plant a campus in this place called Lehi, Utah. Never heard of it, but it's really in the heart of Utah County. It's often called Silicon Slopes. because of all the tech that's coming here. It's the county that BYU's in, the Missionary Training Center. It's 90+% LDS. At the time, it's maybe changed a little bit now, but didn't know what I was doing. Felt like I never worked at a mega church before, large church before. Felt like I had gotten drafted in the last round of the draft by Paul, who took a chance on me, and ended up planting this campus in Lehi, Utah that was successful. And that was 7 years ago. So got here in 2015. My daughter Nora was 3 at the time. Jack was like 3 months. My wife Carissa and I had been married at that time, maybe 8 or 9 years. And it was hard. Church planting is incredibly difficult. Multi-site is different. It's in my mind, it's a gift to families. It's a gift to leaders because yes, we're starting a new work, but we are on a team, and there's vision and there's values and there's support in many ways: financial, resource support, people support, emotional support. And so that was kind of the story. We moved to Utah, planted that campus. It grew. About 4 years in, we had a change to our teaching model. And I jumped onto the teaching team, where I started to speak at all the locations, not just the one I was at. That changed into an XP role as we were kind of started to take a look at succession, where I was teaching a ton, but also over 3 of our campuses. That went pretty well. Then I was over all 5 of them. That went pretty well. We went through succession, which we'll break down here in a little bit. And then July 1st, I took over. So that's the quick bio of us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And we were chatting briefly beforehand. We had Paul on one of the first episodes of Lead Pods back a couple years ago. So, and I think a lot of people in the MB circles at least heard Paul's name, maybe have met him a little bit, but he's got a pretty crazy story of how South Mountain was founded. So we don't need to spend too much time here, but just I think it's important for us to know his background as part of this discussion here. So can you fill us in? Paul's background, how did South Mountain get started? Why don't you share some of that story with us?
I mean, when you talk about, pastoral heroes, Paul's mine. I mean, he's my mentor, was my boss. We played golf last month. He's traveling now, but he moved out from California, from Bakersfield. He got to like his early 40s and asked himself, can I do what I'm doing the rest of my life? If I'm going to make my life count, what am I going to do? And he really had this holy discontent for lost people. And he was either going to go to San Francisco or Utah. And he says he chickened out and went to Utah. And so, he and Jenny and the boys got here in the late 90s. And I mean, just the stories of planting are kind of those stories you hear, licking envelopes, sending mailers, signing his own home for collateral on the first loan that they had. I mean, just crazy stuff, really difficult. Started in their garage, outgrew that, got it into a little office complex, a little like dentist type of like building, and then moved into a warehouse, and then along the way adopted some other campuses, and then launched a campus, and just went through the trenches to get SMCC off the ground. And his goal was that he wouldn't have to take another job eventually, and turned out he didn't need to do that as the church grew. And so it's a pretty incredible story. I think people have perhaps heard that story or some of it, but so now SMCC's 5 locations, just a little context, 5 locations, few thousand people, 30 plus staff members, spread out across Utah. So 4 of our campuses are here in the Salt Lake area, within 30 minutes of each other. And then one's about 3.5 hours away in St. George. And one of our campuses is completely in Spanish, the singing, the preaching, it's all in Spanish. We call it the International Campus because there's people from a bunch of different countries that make up that campus with Pastor Alberto. So that's kind of the lay of the land and the bio of SMCC.
Yeah, very cool. So when you first started having some of these conversations with Paul, did you know, was succession kind of on his mind when he was talking to you? Or I'm guessing there were probably 4 other campus pastors. So how did that ever come up, or what was that on your radar at all back when you first were in conversations, or what were the first conversations like?
It's not as easy as there was some tension in those days. Basically, our model was that campus pastors would preach. And so every week, and so every campus had a campus pastor who would preach and lead and shepherd. Really, they operated like a lead pastor. And while that got us to where we were at that time a few years ago, it wasn't going to get us to the next step, because in that model, those leaders want to be lead pastors, and they probably should be lead pastors. They're gifted for it. They're wired for it. They're driven for it. And so two of those campus pastors went on to do that. They went on to be lead pastors. And at that time, I was the last man standing, I suppose.
Okay.
And so there was this tension around our model shifting. And then with those two guys leaving, it kind of became, well, Eric seems to be the last man standing that could then fit into that lead pastor role, because our campus pastors were sort of functioning like that. And so in that regard, when it came to who would apply for the lead pastor role, we decided to only take internal applicants. I was the only one who applied, for a few reasons. One, because of the educational requirements, the leadership requirements, but also because of my wiring and my current position in the organization. So Paul came to me very early on and said, "Hey, I think you could be the guy." Kind of said, "I'd like you to be the guy, but we have a massive process we're going to run." And that was, I'm not a very patient person. This was 3-4 years ago. And so probably 3 years ago. So, and this is worth talking about, but for the next guy up going through that process, there's a lot of pressure and intensity and some insecurity, because you feel like you're in a 2.5-year interview. Like any moment I could make a decision or do something, preach a bad sermon, make a bad leadership call. And you're thinking, is this going to tank the whole thing? And so I don't think there's a lot of talk around what's it like for the guy to sit in waiting. And that's worth talking about pretty deeply, because I've learned a lot through that. But yeah, it was just Paul having some conversations with me. And what happened, is he went to the elders early on and said, "Guys, I've marked this day. I'd like to move in this direction." He initiated that process, which is a big, important step. Really different when the lead pastor initiates versus the elder board initiating. That's a completely different road. So I think at the core of this success process, there's a few key players, but one of them is Paul being the one to initiate. And the thing that was so helpful is that SMCC wasn't built on Paul Robie's personality or his brand. He's not the brand of SMCC. I don't want to be the brand of SMCC. So he already was not the face. I mean, there were seasons in which all 5 campuses had campus pastors preaching, and Paul was preaching. He'd preach a couple times a month somewhere, but he's not the brand. And so that really helped the process. So anyways, Paul says, "I think you're the guy." The elders go, "We have no clue if he is or not." And that's what produced some tension for me personally. And but that's where the process kind of began. Paul and I having just a couple conversations with me saying, "I think I would be interested. I think I might be able to do this." And really the robust process, although very intense, and we can talk about that, actually gave me a lot of confidence that it wasn't Paul just picked me because he and I play golf together and I beat him. And so he likes, what I mean? Like it's not, it really was, I was the best fit versus Paul choosing somebody. And that whole process set me up for success with the entire congregation. And we'll get to how they played a part in succession too, but that's where it began.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I'm going to just go off course just a little bit because I think it's a tangent, but I think it's an important one. You said that Paul set it up to where it wasn't built around his personality. It wasn't the brand Paul Robie. It was your church, right? And so I think like there's probably maybe a handful of pastors out there who their goal is to make their face the brand, right? There's a couple that maybe we can think of who their church is that person. But I think a lot of other times that just kind of happens by accident, right? Like there's just a charismatic person who's a good leader and people follow that leader, and churches kind of stumble into this. Okay, this person is our church. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Like what did Paul do that helped set that up? What are you doing? How can other churches do that a little bit easier?
Yeah. So really, if someone says, well, what is your brand then? We call it the SMCC way. And our brand is a culture and a philosophy of ministry. It's marked by a few key values. People know those. One of them is belong before you believe. Another is we measure maturity based on how well we love God and love others. Another one is the fully engaged attenders value and serve the guest. That brand, that culture is our brand. So it doesn't matter who you're going to listen to. You're going to be in an environment where you can belong before you believe. You're going to hear a message that's helpful and hopeful. So really, we're trying to create a team that can create a culture. And so that's what he did. And, I think he would tell you, he doesn't live to preach. He had to do it to lead, and he was happy to do it to lead. And leaders will find a way to communicate, but he's not like a purebred speaker. And he would be the first to tell you that. And so, because of that wiring in him, it was easy for him not to make his preaching the main staple of the church. Now, the thing that was really important for us, and this is now a multi-site conversation, but what I think you're seeing with churches that are built on a person is that it's way more likely that when that person retires or goes away, they go to autonomous churches. And I think we've seen that with like Keller in New York, that it was multi-site, but when he went away, they became autonomous churches. That was one of the first conversations we had to have. And I wasn't really in the room. It was the board and Paul talking about, okay, Paul, when you retire, do we go autonomous? And really what we discovered is that the SMCC culture must remain if we want to continue to fulfill our mission in Utah. And if we go autonomous, we might lose the thing that made us so successful in the first place. And so that was one of the key decisions that needed to be made early on. And we made the decision to stay multi-site. And that was easy. It was easier to make that decision because Paul wasn't the brand. The culture was, and we wanted to maintain that culture. So those are some of the things that allowed us to walk through this in a way where it wasn't Paul Robie's going away, the whole thing's going to crumble. It was just not built. He built it and it was incredible, but he didn't build it on him. He built it on this philosophy.
That's great. I think it's really wise to do it that way. But I think even if you are very intentional about that, it's still true that people follow leaders, right? And so he built a successful church who knew him as the leader, right? So let's kind of continue the succession story. So as you're on staff, it's kind of, maybe at least internally, it's kind of becoming clear you might be the guy. Let's talk through about that some more. So what was that like for you as those whisperings probably got out to the church? How did that start to affect you as a leader, your relationship with the church? Walk us through those years.
Yeah. So, early on, we decided to get help. The elder, and when I say we, I'm really meaning Paul and the elder board. Paul was a key part of this, but the elder board, they were phenomenal through this. So they decided early on, because SMCC is a pretty unique church, and a lot of churches think they're unique. We were actually told by Vanderbloemen, who came to help, you actually are unique. We brought Vanderbloemen in. So they do this with churches all day, every day, help churches go through succession. We're a church that's never done it. So we, spent the money, I think it's money well spent, to get consultation. So they came in, easily 2.5 years prior to the date that Paul had circled. And they interviewed our staff, interviewed me, talk. That means really doing a deep assessment into the organization, saying these things need to get cleaned up in your systems and processes. These staffing things aren't clear, and let's look at the team of players and see. And they came away from that basically thinking, here's 10 things that need to get cleaned up and made healthy if you're going to have a healthy succession. And they came away thinking, based on talking to the staff and based on what we've talked with Eric about, he could be a fit. Here's some things he's going to need. I'm in my mid 30s. And so at that time, in my early 30s, they're like, he's never done this before. He has a master's of divinity, but leading a multi-million-dollar multi-site organization, you don't learn that in seminary. So he's going to need some extra leadership there. I went to the Townsend Institute. I could brag about that place. It was so transformative for me with John Townsend, did a org leadership certificate. He's going to need baby steps. So maybe consider giving him leadership over these 3 campuses, which are close and English speaking, and then add in the international campus and the St. George campus, which are farther away and, require more leadership tact. And so they gave us like a list of those things. And so that's when I stepped in from a teaching pastor to an XP role with executive pastor, to sort of give me an opportunity to prove myself. And I knew that was the case. I knew I had to prove myself. And although that felt weird, there were times where my insecurity would crop up and say, I'm pretty sure Paul just thinks I should have this. Why do I have to do this? In my heart of hearts, there were a few moments like that.
Oh, sure.
Looking back, it was the right decision at absolutely the right time for me to step into that. So there was challenges along the way. I mean, there were employees that resigned during that season. I applied pressure to some problems I saw that needed to be changed, and that was not easy. I remember I had to lead a campus through transition. Remember, this is during COVID too. This is the heart of COVID, right? So I'm preaching online a lot during all the video stuff, which kind of accelerated people getting to know me. So that was kind of a happy accident in some ways. But yeah, so Vanderbloemen came in and they were so helpful in that process. So they gave us sort of like over the next 18 months, here's some things you got to do. One of them was to form the lead pastor profile, job profile, make a decision too about will you take external applicants or internal applicants. And the other board, had walked through their plan of succession. So, I mean, we're talking pages and pages of printed material about the strategy of succession, because Vanderbloemen told us 90% of churches that go through the retirement of a lead pastor experience decline. When it's a founding lead pastor, oh my goodness, the odds are so against you.
Right.
And so we were so thorough through this process. Not to mention, we're elder protected staff led model. So your bylaws play a huge part in succession. You got to pay attention to that. So this is the only thing we vote on at SMCC is the hiring and firing of a lead pastor. So we knew that at some point this would all come to a vote at 5 different locations. So it was a marathon approach. But if I'm tracking along the story, I think basically right now we're to Vanderbloemen saying, you guys should consider doing this in this process. We said yes to that. I took over as XP. They started to develop the job profile. And then at some point they were going to post that and allow internal applicants to apply. And when that was posted, I applied. So now we're maybe halfway through some of that story. Okay. What do you think? Where do you want to go next?
Well, one of the first things I'm thinking, I don't know you very well, so I don't really know how you're wired, but like just hearing you talk, I can only imagine just the awkward situation after awkward situation, right? Where you maybe Paul kind of tapped you on the shoulder, but you have to go through all these steps, and you're in leadership over these 3 campuses. And you mentioned you have to make some hard choices. Mm-hmm. I imagine there are people in the church family who are like, who is this new guy? He's not Paul. We love Paul. Who's this kid? And I'm sure you probably heard some of those things verbatim, and you're probably feeling that, 10 times 20 more than what's actually being said. So how did you deal with that? How did you deal with the personal pressure of trying to live up to Paul? Kind of just you're just in an awkward situation. So how did you feel? How did you handle it?
Yeah. I mean, I tried to connect with as many people as possible, and I tried to lead with humility and vulnerability. So one of the things I did is rather than, and this is something my wife and I talked about a lot, I didn't have to have this position. I wasn't twisting anybody's arm to get it. I wasn't playing games to earn votes. I wasn't politicking to be in this seat. It was, if the board and the church think I'm the best leader for it, I will say yes. If they don't, I'm not leaving. So I had this kind of peace and freedom along the way where I could sit down with a leader and not have to convince them to vote for me. I could just listen to their concerns and validate their emotions of, you're going to miss Paul. I'm going to miss Paul. Man, that's going to be hard. Somebody, we had these town hall meetings, and I can talk to you about that, but someone asked, hey, how do we know that you're going to care for this culture like Paul did? And I had to say, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know if I will, but the best I can tell you is Paul has poured his heart into me. And I think that's the best thing I have to go off of. And so it was awkward. There were meetings where people were like, so-and-so quit 4 years ago. He should come back and be the lead pastor. And it's like, gosh, you know what I mean? I liked his preaching more than yours. Like that stuff just happened. And there's no way around it. Like it's gonna prick your insecurity. And it did for me. But I think the thing that got me through that was knowing I didn't have to have the position, and I wasn't going to twist anybody's arm to get it. And I wasn't going to throw a pity party if it wasn't me. And that really produced some freedom. And that posture just came from me focusing on a gospel identity, that my identity is not wrapped up in being a pastor. It's not wrapped up in my performance. It's not wrapped up in me having the title lead pastor. I don't need any of that to know who I am in Christ. And that freedom got me through those days, but those days were awkward for sure. There were times where people would say, hey, when you're the lead pastor, you should, and like, oh wait, I'm sorry, wait, you're not, oh crap. And I just, it got so awkward, it was like, trying to talk about it without talking about it. It was just strange. Knowing people are in meetings talking about you, the elder board, scrutinizing my leadership and personality, scrutinizing Vanderbloemen's report about me once I did apply. Because I went through Vanderbloemen's process like you would a lead pastor for any placement that they were doing. Yeah, it was a bit uncomfortable, but it was the right thing, because through all that, it produced this confidence that, you know what, this wasn't rushed. This wasn't a circus show, like we didn't just play games with people on stage to make it look like a real process. It absolutely was. The elder board would tell me that if Vanderbloemen had 1 ounce of reservation about any internal candidate, including me, we would have gone outside. But Vanderbloemen said, we fully recommend Eric, in the report back to the board. And that's when I began to interview with the board. So we're not even to the board yet. We're interviewing. I went through the Vanderbloemen thing first to get we wanted their conclusion about me as an applicant before it went to the board.
Yeah. It's crazy. Okay. Well, another thing that I'm thinking about, so we're kind of doing 2 things on this episode. So you're like, this story is just fascinating, and I want to finish your story, but also like, I want us to be a resource to churches who are maybe in a similar spot, or they might be in a similar spot sometime soon. So again, we'll finish up your story, but another quick pause here. So because I don't know you or Paul very deeply, would you say that your leadership and your preaching, similar styles, very different styles? And is that good or bad? Like, is it helpful?
Yeah.
If you're succeeding a long-term guy, do you want to try to find someone like that guy, or just find the right person, even if they're way different? What was that like?
Yeah. I would say we are more different than we are alike. If we're going with people that the listeners to this podcast would know, he's far more Tim Keller. I'm far more Andy Stanley. Okay. However, we want our preaching to be the perfect hybrid of Tim Keller and Andy Stanley.
Right.
So I would say a lot of my content, the FD, that's how we talk about full devotion and full delight. Like Paul's approach to talking about the gospel in Utah, in terms of, I don't know if people would be familiar with John Piper's Christian hedonism approach. Like we want to create Andy Stanley environments with Tim Keller, John Piper theology, right? It's like, that's kind of what we're trying to do in a nutshell. And I think my theology has been deeply formed by Paul. So in terms of content, Paul's preaching and my preaching are pretty similar. We have a teaching model where one person writes and a lot of other people preach the sermon. Well, Paul, and this is his humility, would preach what I wrote, like he's the lead pastor. He's preaching what I would write in a message. Wow. But I think that's because our content is so aligned in how we talk about the gospel. But the way I deliver it and the way he delivers it would be very different. I spend far more time on polish and transition and moments, and he's just like got his notes up there full of chicken scratch, and he's incredibly effective. And I'm like trying to preach with no notes, like it's like, we're just kind of different because we have our eye on a different generation. And we've talked about this. So, and my leadership style is pretty different too. We're both visionaries, but he's that entrepreneur, visionary. He's a bit of a CEO in how our church functions. And I think, when he's the startup guy, he's grown up from mom and pa to, multiple locations. I think I'm just building on that. And I think, my leadership style is just a natural evolution of that. So I think our preaching, it's very different though. Yeah. I'm not positive, warm, I don't know if you're an Enneagram or Myers-Briggs guy or a Strengths Finder guy, but I'm your typical stage guy, high energy, a lot of hand gestures, talk fast. And Paul's like your father who, is just full of wisdom. So we are pretty different in that regard. Okay,
cool. Okay, well, I got a lot more questions. Let's make sure we finish your story. So you're I think last you were kind of leaving off with your interviewing with the board, right?
Yeah. And one of the things I forgot, that one of the things that informed our lead pastor profiles, we did send a survey to our church. Vanderbloemen recommended this. I think they developed it. And that survey is, what are you looking for in the next lead pastor? And basically that was an important thing. This was way before I even officially applied. It was, I wanted to see that survey. I wanted to see the job profile to know if it was a fit, because if the church through this survey said, hey, we want to go in a different direction, then I'm not the guy. But the survey came back and basically it was, we're going to continue on in the vision and mission of SMCC as is. A few tweaks along the way. Here's what we're looking for in our next lead pastor. But that survey was very encouraging for me personally. That survey informed the job profile, which is very encouraging for me personally. And then I applied. I mean, and when I say apply, it wasn't like, I texted Paul and said, count me in. It was a resume and a cover letter, and it went to Vanderbloemen. Well, then they took me through all of their Vanderbloemen stuff, their assessments and their interviews. with our Vanderbloemen consultant. And then they came back with we recommend Eric. And that's where I began to interview with the board. That interview was 4 hours long with my board. It was, people were like, that must have been awful. And I was like, I loved it. I love talking about where I want us to go. I love the conversation. It was great. So the board then meets. We also had a succession committee too. And the succession committee, they were the ones working hard on the job profile and analyzing the survey and things like that. It was current board members and previous board members were in the succession committee. And so the succession committee said, okay, we are going to put Eric to the church now. So after they said, we think Eric's the guy. And these guys, I'll just tell you, they are some of the most successful, analytical, business-minded, incredibly godly men I know. I mean, they're not falling for Eric's a good preacher, he should be our next leader. Like, they're not those guys. They are not. I mean, it was, they were brutal in their assessment. Like, it wasn't like, we're just going to do this because Paul thinks this is the way to go. Like, they did an amazing job. Well, because we're a multi-site church, what we did is we hosted a town hall at every location. So Paul and I and the elder from that location, because each of our locations have an elder, we hosted 5 town halls at 5 campuses where I casted my vision. Paul said, here's why I think we can trust Eric for the future, and then took Q&A. And some of those were like 3 hours long. Yep. And then everybody casted a vote if they were fully engaged. Or we don't use the word membership a lot because of its connotations in Utah, but basically it's, you're baptized, you give, you're in a group, and you've attended a service in the last year or whatever, like some of those normal things. And that was in like November, December of 2021. And if someone wants like the real details, you can go to our website, smccutah.org/succession, and really see our process spelled out too. Yep. So we had this town hall, all the votes came in, and it was like 400 yeses and 4 no's. So that was a pretty good number. The board would tell me they were shooting for 100%, but they, 99.6, they thought that was pretty good. So then I had 6 months. So then I knew, and that was just a huge relief. Like, okay, the runway is cleared. Now I can lead. So like, I felt so free to lead. And the great thing about it is, when you're applying for a job, you're trying to show them your best side. You're trying to, do all that. I couldn't do that. These people had known me and my wife and my life for 7 years. So the great thing is that they wanted me to be their leader. Not just the board thought, hey, we like him, so you should like him too. Like, it was the church voted. And that was just so affirming for me. And so, but then there was still a 6-month process where Paul basically was letting me lead. And he would say, I will only grab the wheel if you're about to drive into a ditch. And that didn't really happen. We had this beautiful succession weekend where Paul got on stage in the church, and they just, applauded. It was this amazing weekend. We had an installation service where, Paul was in tears. I was in tears. It was just a beautiful, we're not a very charismatic church, but it was a very heavenly type of holy night. Yeah, it was very, cool. Very incredible. And I think, now when people ask me like what it's like, I feel like I'm living a dream. It's a church I love in terms of vision and values. It's a church that wants me here, and we're seeing success now. So I love megachurch. I love that. And because I think church should reach as many people as possible. I love church planning. Multi-site is that. Like, I'm staring down maybe the next 30 years of my life. Paul retired at 66. I'm 36. I'm just dreaming about what we can accomplish as a team over the next 30 years. And that's, if I go 30 years here, that's longer than the church has even been around. And basically Paul cast this vision early on in his retirement. We want to be a church that's effective for 100 years, not a building that's 100 years old, but a church that's effective for 100 years with 4 lead pastors. That's kind of our dream. Okay. And I'm in the 2nd chapter. Paul was chapter 1. I'm chapter 2. I'm already thinking about how will I go through succession for chapter 3, and then chapter 4. We'll be dead by then. But that's kind of that's kind of the story. That's what we're focused on. But I guess I just want to say Vanderbloemen did an incredible job. Our church members did an amazing job. We don't know what we don't know, but when I talk to my campus pastors, we can't think of one family that left because Paul left and retired. He'll still be a part of our church. He's gone for 6 months now to let me get my feet under me, but he'll be back in attending in January, and he can volunteer then. And then July 1st, he can begin to lead in a volunteer capacity should he choose to do that. And I'm sure he will. So Vanderbloom did a great job. The church did a great job. Our bylaws were very clear. That helped us. Those are some kind of rails to run on. Our elders were incredible. I think Paul at the core of this did a great job. And I just try to take my next step and play my part. And but here we are, and we've only grown through succession, both in terms of any metric you want to measure, in terms of unity among the staff. And that's just really, really exciting.
Well, it sounds like you guys did hit it out of the park, like to get only 4 no's and to grow in all those different metrics that you mentioned. You seem like you're in a very healthy space. I'm just excited for you. It sounds awesome. So
Yeah,
we're kind of running out of time here, as we begin to wrap up, I want to hear just from your perspective, what lessons you've learned, what you want to pass on to other churches and other similar positions. If I could just repeat back to you, you said several times that Vanderbloemen getting outside help sounds like it was a big win for you guys. Just hearing you speak, you are very humble through this process. You said, if you didn't get it, that's great with me. I'm not going to leave. I'm going to be a team player. I'm going to stick this thing out. Sounds like Paul was in a similar spot where he wasn't holding on too tightly to the reins. He was ready to pass it on to you. And like you mentioned, he's gone for 6 months to give you some space to lead, which I think is really wise. So humility, outside help, time. You guys took your time. This wasn't a quick thing.
Yeah.
What else went well, or what might you change if someone else listens in a similar spot? What went well? What would you change?
One thing we haven't talked about is just the staff and their participation in the process. A lot of staff, like some of our staff are in their 50s. They've reported to Paul, and very quickly they reported to somebody 20 years younger. That takes humility. I'm so grateful for the support of our staff, and we made some hires too to surround me with the type of people that I'm going to need. I don't have that business experience that Paul had as an entrepreneur. So we hired an executive pastor over all operations. And so he takes care of the business side of things. And so that was a hire. We had to spend a lot of money there to make that hire so that I had what I needed around me to be successful. Because if I was trying to be the HR department and trying to be the contract signer and all these things, that would not be good for me. I don't have that wiring. And so Vanderbloemen spotted that early on. Like, he doesn't have that experience. He's going to need help. So, I guess I would say a church needs to look at all of it. They need to look at all of it. You can't just look at who's the next leader. You got to look at what's our staffing structure like? What's our financial picture like? What's our vision and values? Is it healthy enough to do all this? It took us 2.5 years. And from where I sit, that felt like a long time. But really, it could take 5 to 10 years to get you into a place where you're ready to go through succession. So I would just, encourage churches, like, get on it now. Doesn't matter where you're at. It is not too soon to think about succession, because that's downstream of vision and values, which like it all connects. And because we were a very healthy church, we were able to have healthy succession. You're not going to have healthy succession if your church isn't healthy to begin with. So you got to begin to think about that. Yeah. So I'm looking at, like, what would I do the exact same way again? Like, I would probably do it almost the exact same way. I mean, I'm kind of optimistic. I can't think of something I would have probably changed. That's really a testimony to all the people that played a part in it. Yeah. So I'm sure there's something. I'm going to think about it more, but nothing just jumps out at me.
It sounds like you guys did it very, very well, which is awesome.
But really, knowing who you are as a church is really crucial, because then you got to know what type of leader you're looking for. And so all these, it's a big puzzle. It's a big puzzle. It's probably a 100-piece puzzle, and you got to understand each piece pretty well to go through succession. And I think a lot of churches that I know are working through it. There's another church in the area. They have a similar leader on, a single site location, and they're trying to figure out how to go through it. And they've chosen the exact opposite plan as we chose. And I'm just curious to watch and see how it goes, and see what they learn and stuff. But I feel like in Utah, at least, we sort of have a head start, or, we were some of the first ones to have turned it over from a boomer to the next gen leader. And it's going really well.
It's awesome. I'm glad you said that. Last question, we'll get you out of here on this, because I think this is a pretty nationwide issue. I think it's probably true in Mennonite Brethren as well as every other Christian church. We started this conversation talking about this. There's this shift where going from boomers to millennials or whatever they fit on that spectrum. Like it feels like the church, capital C church, is in a little bit of a state of transition. So if a church is led by a boomer in their 60s and they're looking to a millennial in their 30s, what positives, negatives do you see? Are you excited about that? Just as we are all kind of entering this kind of unique season, what do you see? Yeah. What inspires you? What else do you want to say that we haven't said yet?
Yeah. I think the temptation is to look at talent first. And I just think that's the miss. You got to look at character first. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen that with some of the big name pastors who have blown up their lives in their ministries, is that talent outpaced character. And I think the temptation for a boomer is to look at a 30-year-old and go, look at the talent. Talent cannot take a church into the future. It's an important piece of that leader's life and how they'll lead. But character, and my definition of character comes from Henry Cloud, it's the capacity to face the demands of reality. It's a leader who understands themselves. They're not perfect, but they're growing more mature in their ability to be honest about themselves and look for problems, look for bad news on purpose to lead through it. And so I just think, the boomer should not be impressed by talent and overlook character. I've made that mistake plenty of times. And I think that's an important piece of this. I think the other thing too, for me, one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing as a leader is there's two in leading SMCC. One is I know where I want us to go and I know what it's going to take to get there, but I have to choose the speed at which the organization can move there. That's getting good. Getting the speed of change right is a very, very hard thing, because you have people on your team and I'm already changing things too fast for them. And there's other people that are like, why haven't you fixed this by now? The speed's too slow. And so that speed component is really tricky. The other thing that's really tricky is bringing about change at SMCC without undoing who we are as a church. It's like, where's the sweet spot of adding in really clear vision without saying we're undoing that which made us successful for 24 years. Right. So I'm not changing our mission. I'm not changing our vision or values, but there are some things I'm implementing that are brand new to us. We're in the middle of a vision series right now. And really it's discipleship that's going to take us into the future, I think. And I have a way of talking about that I think is very clear. And the board was excited about that, even in the interview process. So for like 18 months, I've been preaching this discipleship paradigm of head, heart, hands. It's not profound, but it's at least clear. And I think as a senior leader, your job is to make it as clear as possible. And so that's a real challenge. It's like, okay, Paul came here to reach a group of people for the next chapter of SMCC. That group of people, they've been reached or they've grown out of that stage. I'm trying to reach their kids now. You know what I mean? And those kids are 23. Paul came to reach them when they were 35. Well, their kids, 20 years later, 35, 40, 55, their kids now are having kids. And so what does the second generation LDS person think, believe, feel? What do they look for in church? And so some of the things that made SMCC very successful in the late 90s, early 2000s, sort of that attractional model, that seeker sensitive movement, people still want attractive environments. They're still seeking. It's just a different way to connect with them. So those are some of the things that I'm wrestling through, is how do we change without changing what made us successful? And those are some challenges I'm facing. Yeah.
Well, you're wise to take them slowly, I think. And I love hearing what you're doing. I think it's awesome. So, man, Eric, our time went fast. I feel like we could go a lot longer, but you have a great story. I love how you guys led through this process. It's one that I hope a lot of us listening can emulate in our churches. So thanks for kind of leading the way for us and sharing your story with us. It's been great talking with you. So thank you, Eric.
You bet.
USMB is partnering with immigrant churches through the new CORD program, and you can be part of it. CORD will provide biblical training around our confession of faith, assistance in establishing a stable place of worship, leadership development, and connection with like-minded congregations. USMB will partner for 3 years with up to 3 vetted congregations at a cost of $55,500 per church. Would you consider partnership through CORD? For more information or to donate, visit www.usmb.org/cord-program or contact Terry Hunt at pastorwh@gmail.com.
Well, once again, many thanks to Eric for spending time with us today, sharing this story. And I want to say thanks to the folks at South Mountain, for those of you listening. Eric and Paul and the leadership team there and everyone who handled it so well, it seems like. And I think it speaks volumes that really Eric said he doesn't think of anything he would have done differently. It was a long process, but one that I think needed to happen, and it sounds like it led to a really good result. So as I'm kind of listening back and just thinking through this, lessons that we can take away, I think he's really wise to say to not only look at talent, right? Character counts. You have to look at character first. Don't be blinded by someone, especially if they're younger and have a lot of talent. And also get on it now, right? It's never too early to start thinking about succession. And I think that's also extremely wise for leaders to be thinking about today, wherever you're at in your leadership journey. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. We've got some more really good ones coming to you soon. So I encourage you to subscribe wherever you're listening. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time right here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.